It has been well known over the past few years that political ideas, certain kinds of political ideas, have become injected into various items of entertainment and fiction and fantasy literature, so on and so forth, all in the name of pushing a particular agenda, typically dressed up in the language of inclusion or dressed up in the language of, and this is one of my favorites and also one of the most dreaded words, one of the most dreaded words that used to mean something good that now means something bad: representation. Those are the two buzzwords used to inflict this kind of damage that we have seen being inflicted upon the creative minds of people in the West. And while it is a well-accepted maxim by many people who are, like me, who are critical of the kind of cultural tyranny we have seen coming out of the halls of wokeism and coming out of the halls of those who endorse wokeism as an ideology, far too many of us take for granted that wokeism is a terrifying and destructive force. And there's actually a famous phrase that says everything that woke touches turns to, you know what, it spoils it. And while this is absolutely true in my opinion, it's especially true of things that are not inherently political and have absolutely nothing to do with politics, but have more to do with something else, it doesn't really explain the full extent of what wokeness can do and what it has done to the imaginations, the minds of men, and the products of those imaginations and those minds being fiction, literature, and film, and all other kind of things. Many of us can point at different instances of wokeism corrupting film, like whether it be The Little Mermaid, trying to corrupt the film, which was perfectly fine by adding a black girl to be the lead cast. Nothing inherently wrong with that, but it's wrong when you make a change not to enhance the story, but to make a political point. And there are just 10,000 other examples. I won't go down that path. There are plenty of others that go down that path. But it's not corruption. Mere corruption can be fixed, because mere corruption is evidence of something that is broken, and that then gives you the tool or empowers you to fix it. What wokeness and really the introduction of totalizing political views can do and has done in fiction, in literature, in film, across the creative realm, is that it has enslaved the minds of men to a certain kind of tyranny. This is much greater, much more vicious, and much more sinister than mere corruption. Because as I mentioned, corruption can be washed away by the forces of rationality and intent. But when your mind is enslaved, the very tool that you use to understand that wokeism is bad, to understand that tyranny is bad, to understand that totalizing ideologies are bad, is the very tool that has now been turned against you by the person seeking to foist their political agenda upon you. Let's be very clear, my friends. We have to understand, and in order to get what I'm trying to say, we have to first understand what is the role of fiction in society. And actually, this will tie into some political ideas as well. Because many people may think that wokeness is just a cultural phenomenon that has some political implications and so on and so forth. But actually, if you understand that the role certain ideas have in society, in the health of society, you'll then more easily understand how those ideas will parlay into a certain kind of political order in the future for the society as a whole. And so let's actually consider, what is the role of fiction in society? Well, the role of fiction in society, my friends, is actually quite simple. The role of fiction in society allows us to escape the world we live in and go into a world that by necessity will reflect our world in some way, but in other ways pushes the boundaries and the contours and the limits of our own mundane existence, and by doing that gives us beneficially insight into how we can make our own lives here on Earth, here in the real world, better. Consider the Silmarillion, for example, Tolkien's sort of creation story of the Lord of the Rings universe. There's a lot of themes in that book, good versus evil, the small guy triumphing over the big guy, all kind of things that inspire a kind of confidence in man about his standing in the world. Consider Star Wars, for example, one of my favorite film franchises, comic book franchises. I have several Star Wars comic books, and when I was a little kid, I was watching the Clone Wars all the time. I would stay up. This is back when we used to record things on DVR. I would stay up so I wouldn't miss it and everything. Yeah, so I am an absolutely huge Star Wars fan. And I've done videos on this channel talking about the philosophy of Star Wars. In fact, if you want to go see a video in that vein, I did a video called The Philosophy of Yoda, where I basically show how Yoda's philosophy can help enhance our lives and all kind of things. When you look at Star Wars, the entire narrative arc of a certain period of Star Wars, the pre-Galactic Empire era, then the Galactic Civil War, then the Rebellion era, all that kind of stuff, you see this figure in Luke Skywalker being invested with this immense responsibility to overcome the greatest heights of evil. And this is just a boy who didn't really even know his father, whose mother had died in childbirth, who had gone through unbearable pain, unbearable growing pains, and unbearable physical pains, only to become a warrior. That's triumph over struggle. Again, a basic story that is integral to the human condition. And fantasy can help amplify those things in a way that inspires us, moves us, and also enlightens us. But the moment fantasy becomes captured by a totalizing ideology, its actual purpose in the world is eliminated, and it becomes just another tool of the person trying to push the ideology and push the agenda upon every single one of us. Wokeism, my friends, is what is called, and I've used this term already a few times in the video, a totalizing ideology. The goal of a totalizing ideology is to monopolize all avenues of human life, including man's creative capacity. And if a totalizing ideology succeeds in monopolizing every single creative organ in man, then they can use that as a tool of their own agenda, and then, by consequence, limit the avenues of self-discovery that are inherent in fictional works, that are inherent in fantasy. If you can enslave a man's creative potential, you can basically take the rest of him and society with him. Why? Because it is the creative capacity which comes from our ability to rationally think, which comes from our ability to reason, that has allowed man to build civilization, that has allowed man to think in abstraction. Abstraction is the gateway towards moral thinking, and moral thinking is the bedrock society needs to survive, and that bedrock is what ensures civilization can exist in the first place, and fiction can exist in the first place. And so if you take away the capacity that I have to reach all these conclusions, you are in effect destroying civilization, and you're decreasing my ability to enhance civilization. Because civilization is simply the long-range product of a bunch of men utilizing their creative capacities to do something. This is why, for example, when they try to convince you that a fictional work needs to be redone because at one point in time it says something that was deemed offensive, you should really ask yourself, well, what's the implication behind that talking point? What's the implication behind that analysis? Is it that the human spirit is so fragile and so susceptible to manipulation that we should all be concerned about what was offensive? Is it that the human mind is so limited as to not be able to understand the wisdom and the pitfalls of past generations? What should be the implication? And this is the most important thing that comes with that little statement right there, is the implication instead, oh no, that it is up to a group of people who seek to centralize power, centralize cultural capital into a few institutions, and then get to decide what is said, how it's said, when it's said. Well, that's basically the implication whenever you see these rewrites that are done for absolutely no reason, and especially whenever you see claims that certain films, certain TV shows are bad or evil, all because they contain things that some people in society today consider unacceptable. It was the philosopher Herbert Spencer that said, there is a soul of goodness in all things evil, and there is a seed of evil in all things good. And the difference between the philosopher and the ignorant man, and this is my words now, the philosopher will consider that soul of goodness and the things that are evil, and will also be able to see the pitfalls of goodness itself. But the problem is, and the objective is, when it comes to wokeism monopolizing fiction and entertainment, goodness, their version of goodness rather, is already presupposed. And instead of having a conversation, like Emerson beseeched us to do in Self-Reliance, to see if goodness be goodness, we are expected, in the name of being a benevolent person, in the name of being a non-racist person, in the name of being a non-homophobic person, in the name of being an inclusive person, to uncritically accept the idea of goodness, their idea of goodness, and then inflict it upon everyone else. When you can control the creative capacity, you can limit the rational capacity, and when you can limit the rational capacity, you can drive men towards absurd, immoral, and frankly stupid conclusions they would have never been drawn to in the first place. This is how wokeness takes fiction, takes the imagination, and enslaves it to tyranny. It uses high-level psychological and epistemic, meaning based in knowledge, manipulation to instill a certain effect in the people it's speaking to. If you can capture the imaginations of men, you can also convince a man who is enslaved that he is actually free. When you can capture the imaginations of men, you can, in the same token, convince a man who is a good person that he is, in fact, not a good person, or that even more so, his personhood rests solely on his accountability and his amendability to the society. When you control the creative capacity, you can do some terrifying things. Just ask Mr. Bernays, who was able to convince an entire generation of Americans the United States was marching towards victory in South America, when in all reality, we were destabilizing the region and manipulating the creative capacities of the people in that region while doing so, which has given tyrants and thought criminals, well, rather thought tyrants, people that want to control your thoughts, the ability and the insight on how to continue to do that for generations. If you think you're immune to propaganda, think again. All of us, every single one of us, even me, are susceptible to propaganda. And the creative capacity is what allows us to overcome it. But wokeness and fiction seeks to attack the jewel, the object of our creative capacity. This is why whenever you see a movie being rewritten, or whenever you see your favorite comic book being turned into something that it's not, or whenever you see political principles being asserted and inserted into a place where they don't belong, you should always ask yourself. People will say, ask qui bono. Okay, qui bono is a great question, but that's a great question in the context of power politics, in the context of seeing the world as one big, large power struggle between elites and the non-elites, between the elites and the populists. And while that analysis has some merit, it has oftentimes been used in such a reductive way so as to reduce its utility to anything beyond fodder for the delusions of men that would rather think and imagine things of fear, who rather think and imagine things of conspiracy, rather than actually try to seek the truth and see the truth for what it is. Some people are addicted to fear. Some people are addicted to seeing a monster behind every corner, even if it's not even a corner, it's just literally a road. Some people are so blinded by their own hubris that they refuse to see beyond it. It's a human thing, yes, but it's a human thing that allows you to be controlled by people that actually mean harm for you. Whenever you see these things being inserted in politics, or being inserted in entertainment and fiction, you should always ask yourself, not qui bono, you should ask yourself, does this principle further the narrative of the story? Does this principle further the ethos of the story? If not, why is it being presented? If so, how so? A culture of critical thinking, I sincerely believe, will allow us to drive back the woke mind tyrants that seek to enslave every single aspect of society to their totalizing ideology. An ideology which they believe they can reduce the complexity, the vast complexity of society, creativity, and culture into this one little idea, and then cross-apply that idea to every single field. That's not how reality works. That's not how things work. And we often understand from history, as the great Hannah Arendt will point out, that when totalizing ideologies become culturally powerful, they eventually become politically powerful. And when they become politically powerful, tyranny, not just of the mind, but of the body and everything else, rolls right in. Let's stop that. Let's think, and let's reject this encroachment upon our creative minds. My friends, like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel if you want to help me in my mission and want to help empower my political commentary to go across the internet, across the world, and my philosophy, and you're interested in commentary and philosophy. Be sure to please subscribe, comment, share this with your friends, please. Donate to me as well. All that is in the comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain convicted, remain creative, and also, please, you better stay pensive. Stay tuned, guys, for more commentary. I'll see you later. Bye, everyone.